G'day guys, thanks for listening to the Noob Spearo podcast today and joining the illustrious Turbo and I in studio. Now, I don't know about you, but I love to save money on spearfishing equipment. When I want to buy a spear gun, there's nothing I like better than saving $20. That's right, you can use the code NoobSpearo at spearfishing.com.au to save $20 on all purchases over $200. That goes along with cheap shipping worldwide and a 90-day no-hassles returns policy. You can also visit Adreno in their physical stores in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane. Check out a huge range of equipment and get advice from more than 60 underwater equipment experts. That's right, support the Noob Spearo podcast by shopping with our sponsor, spearfishing.com.au, and thank you for joining us today.
G'day and welcome to the Noob Spearo podcast. Today we are speaking with none other than Hawaiian Kimi Werner, and we're going to speak to Kimi all about, well, being a travelling spearo. She's travelling the world, spearfishing some great locations. She talks to us all about diving in really cold waters in the Arctic, and she's also going to talk to us about the Antarctic as well and her future plans there. She also tells us a little bit about how to become non-threatening when you're spearfishing so that you don't spook those fish, and a lot of other great tips from Kimi. She's been spearfishing a long time, and you are going to love this episode.
I wanted to share awesome experiences that you can have when you are in the water, and that's why I started spearfishing.
I just clamped down on the reel and got drugged down to about 50 feet, and I'd never had a battle like that before in my life.
So when you're learning where to hunt and find fish, they're the hot spots. It's where fish want to be.
Don't overcomplicate your gear. Don't go diving dressed up like a Christmas tree.
I actually started off in stubbies with a bloody belt with a pig knife on it.
And they've seen this big fin break the surface, roll into the water, look down, here's this nice big great white.
Once your face hits the water and you feel relaxed and all the other stresses of life seem to disappear.
It's a whole new world and it's mysterious, it's magical.
Beats the shit out of netting anyway.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so hello and welcome to the Noob Spearo podcast. It's great to have you with us today, Kimi.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Turbo and I have been up since 4:30 a.m. It's now 7:30, and despite some audio hiccups, you're rejoining us, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Round two.
Round two. So, Kimi, you live in Hawaii. What part of Hawaii are you in now, right now?
Right now, I am on the north shore of Oahu.
Okay. Are you in a populated area, or is it all sort of like rural?
It's a pretty rural area for this island. This island is the most populated of them all.
Yeah.
It's not where I grew up. I grew up on the island of Maui and was raised out in the country over there. And so now I'm on Oahu and I'm trying to live in the most rural part of it just for old time's sakes. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in a more remote part of Hawaii. How did you get started spearfishing?
Well, I didn't really start spearfishing myself until I was an adult, but I got introduced to that whole world, to the underwater world, and to the idea of spearfishing from my dad. He was a very avid spearfisherman, and he used it to put food on the table. It wasn't a sport at all. It was just something to feed his family and to kind of help contribute to his community. And yeah, I mean, it was wonderful for us. I mean, I know that we might have been poor at the time, but I definitely did not feel poor. I mean, I was eating fish and lobsters for dinner, and when I would get to tag along with my dad on these dives, I would pretty much just put in my order for what I wanted to eat and watch as he would swim down and get it for me.
Yeah. I've seen one of the videos on your YouTube channel, and you talk about how you chase octopus. Was it your dad that taught you that technique? And can you explain for our listeners what that technique looks like?
Sure. Yeah. My dad definitely taught me how to hunt for octopus. And I would say the hardest part of it was always just finding the octopus first, because they're such masters of camouflage that you really need to develop an eye and know what to look for that will show you where the octopus lives. And once you find the house or the hole where the octopus lives, there's a few different things you can do. And what a lot of divers do is they'll just kind of go down and, and jam their spear in the hole and kill the octopus in its house. But what my dad taught me is he taught me that, you shouldn't do that because you always want to see how big the octopus is first. And so he has his technique where he kind of just puts the 3-prong tip of his spear in the octopus's hole and just tickles it and irritates it until the octopus wraps all of its legs around the spear and you can get your hands on it and pull it out. And, that really allows you to just see how big it is and whether or not it's a keeper. And if it's not a keeper, you can just let it go. And if it is, then the way that we kill it is we bite its brain.
Very nice.
Yeah, cool. And how did you learn where to bite on the octopus?
Well, it's just right in between and right below the eyes. And so basically, and it's nothing that I do, for thrills or for shock value. It really is just the quickest way to dispatch an octopus. I've tried other ways. I've tried stabbing it with my spear or trying to find the brain with your knife. You can turn its head inside out, but it really is, still alive and grabbing onto you. But if you just are able to put your mouth right over its eyes, and just crunch down in the perfect spot, it will dispatch that octopus immediately. It might take a few tries before you can find that sweet spot. And in that case, like a lot of times when trying to bite it, you might, it might rip your mask off or it might ink in your face and a lot of things can go wrong. But I think once you have the technique down, it really is the most efficient. These days, it's just a one motion thing. I'll grab the octopus, I'll hold on to its head. The minute it wraps its legs around my arm, I know it's going to then try and pull its head out from my grip. The minute it pulls its head, it stretches the head. I see exactly where to bite, and I do it in one motion, and it just turns white, and it's dead. It's instant.
Yeah, wow. Okay, cool. That's an awesome story. So your dad sort of modeled spearfishing and sort of what that looked like to you. When did you get started yourself seriously spearfishing?
When I was about 24 years old and I was graduated from college and living an island away from my dad, I think that's when it really hit me that I missed that part of my life so much. And the more that I thought about it, and realized that I had always just kind of been his little tag along, his assistant, his bag girl. But I hadn't ever really tried to spearfish on my own. And I just thought, man, what a waste, that I didn't learn these things. And I decided to just give it a try. And so when I was 24, I started swimming out and just going with a little 3-prong spear the way my dad would and trying to get fish. And to my surprise, I was able to get fish. But after about a year of doing that, I became friends with these divers that were just, they were national competitors. One was a national champion. Their names were Kalai, Fernandez, and Hayashi, and they just really mentored me. They just taught me to dive on a whole new level.
Hmm. Well, so they acted sort of like as sort of mentors for you, I guess?
Definitely. Just being in the water with them was the best apprenticeship I could ever ask for. It's not like a type of mentor where there's a lot of talking done, we're underwater and there is no formal training or program or anything like that. It was just the fact that I was able to go diving with them. And I think that when it comes to really learning, I think one of the best things you can do is just watch. And for me, I just didn't know that was possible. I had no idea that it was humanly possible to dive that deep. I didn't know that you could actually spear those types of fish. And so really just even seeing it with my own eyes was huge, because the minute you see someone else do something, you know it's possible, and it already opens it up for you to do that too. I mean, it's just a fact, you know, like when you don't know that something's possible, it makes it so much harder to try. It makes so much more fear involved. And so I really think it's important to like not forget the pioneers and not forget the people who really were doing things first, because it was so much harder, you know. It becomes so much easier, you know, once you see things being done. It already gives you that much more confidence and know-how and just vision to do it yourself. And so that's what these guys really did for me, is just through example, I was able to see what was possible.
Yeah, it's a strong case for diving with different people and experienced people. The only person I've really got to watch and spend a lot of time with in the water is Turbo, so that's probably why I can only dive to maybe 7 or 8 meters and not really even shoot fish. But I have a good time because that's what's been.
But you will get to my 10 one day. My 10 meters. Yeah. Kimmy, you're pretty experienced now, and you've been diving for quite a while. What are you currently working on in your diving, or what's an obstacle now as an experienced diver that you're trying to get over, or a technique that you're trying to improve?
I mean, I would just say it still always just comes down to form, more than anything else. I think it really, I always just want to be smooth in the water. I want to have finesse. I want to make sure that when I am taking a drop that it's sleek, that it's smooth, that it's straight, all these little things. And that is something where I've hit points in my diving experience where I just thought, oh, it's in the bag and I have it down. And I did. And then the next thing I know, a couple years go by and now I'm watching myself dive and I'm getting sloppy again, you know? And so it's just always kind of just checking in on myself and just watching my form, I guess, would be one thing I'm always trying to be aware of. But more than that, I don't know. I think it's just always seeing what else you can do, seeing what else is possible, and not being afraid to try new things. You know, I think a lot of times we learn certain rules in diving, you know, and we tend to follow those rules so that everything will work out. But then there always comes a point where you need to break those rules and try something different. And there's just definitely just a whole world of possibilities. And so I'm just always out there pretty much experimenting, whether it's new techniques or whatnot, but just always trying to see what else is possible.
It's something too. I try and work on my form as well. Shrek has an absolutely amazing midwater barrel roll. For a bloke of 120 kilos, he's extremely graceful. So it's poetry in motion, to be honest.
Yeah.
We go and do some pool freediving training with a squad every now and then, Kimmy, and Levi loves to watch my form.
Just like a low-flying F1.
You'd never guess he was heterosexual. But anyway, memorable fish. Could you share with us a story of maybe your first memorable fish, Kimmy?
Sure. I would say that my first memorable fish was still back in that first year of diving, and I was only using a pole spear, a 3-prong pole spear, and all of my dive buddies at the time were trying to get me to move on to a gun, but I just felt like there was still so much more I had to learn and wanted to master with the pole spear. So I was a pretty diehard with using that. And one day I was out getting these little fish called mimpachi, and they're just these really delicious red squirrel fish that we love here in Hawaii. And they don't get much bigger than, 5 or 6 inches long. And I was down looking into this cave where I was just, poking these mimpachi, and I had my 3-prong loaded. It's just a simple spear with a rubber sling on one end, and I had it all stretched and aimed and ready to go. And right when I was lining up on one of the mimpachi, I just saw this much bigger head just slide into the back of the cave, and it ended up being like the biggest bluefin trevally I had ever seen.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, we call it omilu here in Hawaii, and it's a favorite, and I had never gotten one, with my 3-prong, and this one was massive. And so it was just such a perfect opportunity, and I just let that 3-prong go. My spear flew straight and just nailed this fish right in the head. But before I could even celebrate, that fish just turned so quickly. And when it turned that tight in the cape, it just ended up snapping the graphite of my 3-prong, just snapping my spear in half like it was a pencil. Like, I had never known a fish could do that. And I just grabbed the back half of my spear and swam up to the surface, just wondering, like, what just happened. And I kind of thought it was over, but still couldn't help just revel in, like, what a crazy experience that was. But then I looked down, and it was this huge cave systems of just caves and more caves and cracks. And I didn't see the fish swim out of it. So I started investigating until I could see this one little hole that just had a bunch of silt, a bunch of like dust and sand coming out of it, and took a dive down to investigate that. And when I looked in there, sure enough, my big fish was there. He still had 3 feet of spear sticking out of his head. But when he saw me, he just bolted. And so it really just became this chasing game. I had no tools or weapons left. And I was just swimming after this fish, following it around, just completely overexhausting myself. And I'd come back up and breathe and just take drop after drop, trying to chase down this fish and wondering how the heck am I ever going to outswim a fish. But finally, on this one drop, when I was chasing him through this crack, he ended up getting stuck because the spear was still sticking out of his head, and it got stuck in one of the cracks of the reef, and he couldn't go anywhere. So I knew that was my opportunity. I just grabbed him by the tail, yanked him out of that crack. As soon as I did, the spear fell out of his head, and I just realized, like, this is it. There's no letting go now. And I just slid my hand into his gills and was able to get my knife and secure him. And it ended up being a 17-pound bluefin trevally. Oh, wow. 17 or 18 pound. It was a big one. And and it was, that was our Thanksgiving dinner. It was actually a new state record at the time. And
oh, wow.
And I got it with a 3-prong, and it was just such a good feeling.
That's a super impressive fish with a pole spear and a graphite body as well. Wow, that's awesome.
It's a whole lot better than my history with the pole spear, which now stands at 0 and 0.
He it's a funny story, Kimi. He spent maybe $300 on the...
I'll keep going.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay, like a really awesome high-end... Was it headhunter or rife pole spear?
No, it's rife. It's a thing of beauty.
Top of the line pole spear. Took it out maybe 3 times. Every time he just throws it in the boat in disgust and goes back to the gun.
and since then I've even gotten worse and bought myself a nice Matty Sub roller head. So we've got complete opposites.
Oh, funny.
There's a big art to using the pole spear, and I think it's really good when you're starting out, like to learn good skills. So
I totally agree.
Okay, that's a pretty awesome, memorable first fish, especially with a pranger head. And sort of like recent years, what's one of your more memorable catches?
There's a few. I think if I had to choose one right off the top of my head now, I would probably say another very memorable catch with a spear gun would be this one time when I went to Texas, and basically it was this trip where we had heard that there are these big wahoo, out at these oil rigs outside of Texas, and and so my friend Mark Healy, he had been there before, and he was kind of helping plan this trip, and he told me, like, there will be big fish, but this will be a miserable trip. Like, do you want in? And so I said yes, and he was just absolutely right. I mean, I think there were 4 or 5 of us, and we were on this boat that really wasn't very big, and most of the space on it was used I think it was like 30 feet, and most of the space was used for fuel because we planned on going 130 nautical miles out to sea. and and the weather just ended up being terrible. I mean, that was my first experience of a hailstorm. And and the whole time the boat just smelled like gasoline, and the guys are puking. One of them has the runs. Like, it was just very tight quarters with a lot going on. We had this one weather system just come in where we couldn't go. We had to just throw anchor and wait it out. And everybody was just throwing up and miserable in the middle of the night. So it was a trek to get out there. The next day we pulled anchor, finally made it to the spot, only to jump into the water and see that it is the most shark infested water I had ever seen ever. And not just like plenty of sharks, but really, really punchy sharks. I mean, I've had to, like, prod sharks away and, use a pole spear to poke them away, but I had never poked so many sharks in their open mouths before that trip.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, we got out there, and as soon as I jumped in the water and just realized how uncomfortable I was, I just kind of said, you know what? I don't even care if I shoot a fish on this trip. And I just called it from the start. And I'm like, we are so far away from help right now. We're 130 nautical miles out at sea on a tiny boat, diving shark-infested waters. Like, I don't care if I land a fish. I just want us all to get home safely. And so I designated myself. All pressure off. I designated myself to be the group shark prodder. So basically, all the guys, would jump in, and I would just jump in with my 3-prong, and I would be the person and like just kind of on the perimeter, just poking the sharks away, just gently prodding them away as they would come up hot. And then they slowly start to like learn and give us space. But anytime one of the boys shot a fish, it would just turn on all over again, and I'd be the one diving down, to the wounded fish at the end of the line, poking away the sharks with my 3-prong. And they were able to land a few fish, definitely lost a few fish to the sharks. But all of that just kind of made me more comfortable with the situation. And after everybody had a go at it, I did decide that I would just get in the water with my blue water setup and see what happened. And as soon as I slipped in with my gun in hand, the biggest Ono I'd ever saw swam right up to me, and I was able to shoot it and secure it. And so weird, not a single shark bothered me, maybe because they knew me as the 3-prong girl, but like not a single shark bothered me. And I ended up, we didn't get back to land until 2 days later, but by the time we weighed that fish, and it was an 84-pound wahoo. And still my biggest to this date. And it was just, took a lot to get out there. And I think being able to take all the pressure off and focus on safety first, I just felt like it was life's way of rewarding me.
Yeah, that's awesome. 85 pound, I'm just trying to translate it. It's about 36, 37 kilo, I think. That's a bloody good fish. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so moving on, what's your favorite hunting technique, and how do you apply it effectively?
I have a bunch of favorite hunting techniques, and I could definitely get into detail about, throwing sand and mimicking a stingray, feeding at the bottom. Those things are, can definitely pique the interest of fish around you. But more than just having one technique that I apply to every situation, I kind of look at the situation first, and I just see what's going on down there. And if I can see my target fish, I just watch its behavior and I watch what it's doing, and I try and mimic that. And so really it just depends on what type of fish you're hunting. If it's a blue water fish, I just watch the way it moves, and I try and mimic what it's doing. If it's a reef fish down at the bottom and it's, eating seaweed off of a rock, I don't just swim straight to that fish and put my gun at it. Like, what I'll do is I'll just go find my own rock and pretend I'm much more interested in eating seaweed off of my own rock, and that fish will usually come to me. And so basically I'm just studying what's out there and and trying to join in. But the last thing I do is I just try not to show any interest in that fish. I try and keep myself busy, doing these other techniques or whatnot. But I don't give too much energy to that fish. And I think that's just become a very obvious thing to me. And I think it applies in all parts of life. I mean, like if you like somebody, I think it's not a good idea to just start making like serious eye contact at them and just like staring at them, focusing on them. Like you have to play it cool. And that's how I treat my fish. It's really just like flirting. If I want this fish, if I like this fish, the last thing I want to do is be a creep. I don't want to creep it out. Nobody likes a creep. And so I don't just swim directly up to it and I don't just stare at it. I just, I do my own thing, or at least I pretend to. I pretend that I have my own thing going on, and whatever it is so interesting that I allow that fish to come to me.
Wow, sounds like I've got a lot of learning to do. I'm going to have to change my whole approach, and good stuff.
To what?
I don't know, but maybe just less eye contact.
G'day guys, if you're new to spearfishing, I highly recommend listening to our episode Freediving for Spearfishing with Pete Ryder. Pete is an entrepreneur and an excellent freedive instructor, and he has come up with two great courses, the 10-metre freedive and the 5-minute freediver. I've used the 5-minute freediver to increase my bottom time, found it incredibly useful for my trip to the Coral Sea, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. His other course, the 10-metre freediver, is a great resource for those just starting out that literally want to get to 10 metres, and this course will help you learn proper breathing technique and some of the safety aspects associated with freediving.
Use the code NoobSpearo to save 20% on all of Pete's courses. He's put together this deal just for listeners of the show. That's at howtofreedive.com. Use the code NoobSpearo. All right, cool. So, scariest moment. What is your scariest moment out spearfishing, and what did you take away from it?
I mean, off the top of my head, I think the whole great white shark story always comes to mind. And, there was this one time when I was in Mexico, a place where I definitely, knew that there was white sharks around. But on this day that I jumped in the water, it was a very quiet day. Nobody was seeing anything. And when I slipped into the water, my mask was leaking. And so I had to have my head above the surface so I could fix my mask and see what was wrong with it. And as I was doing that, my buddy just started shaking me. And as soon as I put my head back in the water, there was the biggest great white shark I had ever seen, 3 feet away from me and coming right at me. And that definitely, I think, has to stick out as like the scariest moment. But it's also interesting because I think all of the years with spearfishing and being underwater, one thing they really taught me is how to react to fear. And I almost just have this triggered reaction now to do the opposite of what you're supposed to do when you're scared. And so these days, if something really scary happens, I'll go completely calm and almost completely numb because I just want to assess the situation, or I'll just react. But, and in this situation, I did react, and how I reacted before I could even realize what I was doing is as soon as I saw that shark coming at me, I just swam, just directly beelined it right back at her. And we were already so close to begin with, and I just did not know if I would be swimming directly into her mouth or not. But but as soon as I moved towards her, she just turned away from me. And then instead of just seeing, her black eyes and her sharp teeth, then I just saw her big broadside just slowly pass me by. And I mean, it was a moment when I truly got to take in the girth and the length of this the girth and the length of this shark. She was over 5 meters long. And just this big, huge shark. But I also got to see that the way that she was moving, it wasn't aggressive. And it just really showed me that she wasn't, she wasn't acting like a threat. And so I just kept my eye on her, and she swam away, and then she'd kind of get curious again and come back towards me. And every time she did, I knew that I had to at least meet her halfway. I just knew that in the same way where I say, you don't want to be too direct or swim at that fish because you don't want to creep that fish out. I guess I really don't mind creeping the shark out a little bit because I don't want her too interested in me. And so every single time she swam up at me, I swam back towards her. And like clockwork, when I would, she would then just kind of turn, pass me by, and I'd film her. But this one time when she was swimming pretty much like vertically up to me, I swam down and, slowly made my way down to her. And when I did, I just hit this point of a negative buoyancy where I just started to sink. And as I did, she just kind of flattened out underneath me and slowed down to the point where she was barely moving. I mean, she wasn't even moving her tail. And I just knew I had two choices right then. I could do a 180 and flip and start kicking back up to the surface, which just did not sound like a good idea to do right above a great white shark. Or I could just keep sinking. And if I was going to land on the shark, I just told myself, make it smooth, Kimi, make it smooth. And so that's what I did. And I just landed right on her. I just kind of reached out my hand first, touched her, let her know I was there, and then held onto her dorsal fin. And we both just started to glide together. And so definitely what started as the scariest moment ended up being one of the most beautiful.
Yeah, well, interwoven through your whole story, there's a lot of sort of self-awareness. Like at the start, you were talking about mastering that flight or fight, that the response we have in the face of fear. And, like it shows a level of awareness to sort of realize what your natural reaction is in a situation and to decide you're going to consciously act in another way. So that's pretty cool. And the other thing I've sort of picked up between hunting reef fish and body language and changing it for the shark is being aware of what works in different situations. So that's really cool.
Yes, I think you have to know the rules so that you know when to break them.
I saw a lot of the footage from that encounter. There's a video of yours on YouTube, Variables. It's had over 900,000 views when I went to have a look the other week. I was amazed. It's a great piece of footage.
Thank you. Yeah, that it all did get captured on camera, and it was just I really just held on to that footage for a while and didn't know what to do with it because that was back before everybody was swimming with sharks and whatnot, and I just wasn't sure how releasing that footage would be. Like I didn't want to send out an irresponsible message of let's all go out and try and ride a shark or I just didn't want to turn anything to a circus, and so I did hold on to that footage for a while, and then once it started leaking out on its own, I realized, okay, if it's going to get out there, you might as well put it out there with a message that you believe in. And so I really made that video to be less about the shark and more about my philosophy on spearfishing and and harvesting responsibly.
I've seen lots of your videos, so I went on a bit of a rampage because I enjoyed the first one. I've seen your TED Talk, and what's your YouTube channel called?
It's just called Variables.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I saw the North Shore video as well, and a few of them, they're great. You link in your sort of philosophy with, sustainable harvesting very well. So, no, that's cool.
Thank you.
Brings us neatly to the next section of the show, too.
Oh, didn't we have another scary moment about currents?
Ah, okay, yeah. Go there.
Well, basically, guys, I stuffed up the recording, so I've heard this one before, so I'm just going to put my hand up for that one. But, Kimi, can you tell us that story about, I think you were shooting a Wahoo and it kind of went horribly wrong?
Right, yeah. I mean, I think that great white shark story is a very obvious go-to when people ask what your scariest moment is. But for the most part, that is the exception. And I would say, way scarier than sharks or any other predators out there Another terrifying moment that I got myself into was just dealing with currents. There was this one time where we were on this boat trip, and we had been diving for a couple of days, and we were ready to go back to Maui. And I just had a couple pieces of bait fish left, like not a lot at all, probably not enough to shoot a fish, but I didn't want to waste it. So I just asked my buddy if he wanted to jump in the water with me, swim out to the drop off, crumple my burley, and call it a day. And so that's what we did. And, you know, we didn't end up bringing any floats or anything like that, which is terrible and not responsible. But, you know, I just really wasn't expecting, I know, very bad. But I was not expecting to be in the water more than a few minutes. And so I swam out to this drop off, crumpled the fish, and said, okay, let's call it a day. And I went to swim back to the boat when this big wahoo just came right in. I couldn't believe it. And I had my gun, my reel gun, and just pointed at it, shot the wahoo, and it was a big one. And it just ended up spooling me and then towing me. It wasn't a good shot, and this fish had a lot of power in it. And so it just towed me until it ripped off, unfortunately, and got away. But it ended up towing me out into the most ripping, strong current that I've ever felt, ever. And I had no idea what to do. And my friend had followed me and got caught in that same current. And we were both just like getting swept.
It's always better with a friend.
Right. Yes, exactly.
At least you went on your own. That is a good point.
It's true. that is very true. It's still terrible of us in all other measures, but at least we had each other. and so we're basically getting just like, you know, sucked past the last point of this island almost. And luckily what happened is that because that fish had spooled me, I had, you know, a lot of reel line out, and my shaft was dangling, you know, over 100 feet below us. And it ended up just catching on to this pinnacle that came out of nowhere. And the barb of my shaft ended up hooking into this pinnacle, and that just kind of became our lifeline. So my buddy, he basically grabbed on to the reel line. It was too hard for him to hold on to the gun. So the best way he knew how was he wrapped, he had gloves on, and he wrapped the reel line around his gloves so that he could really, really hold on. And then I just held on to him, and we just like, you know, stayed there kind of hoping that the current would somehow eventually slack, or that the boat people would, you know, see us. And we tried to wait it out, but then my buddy's hands started bleeding through his gloves, and he couldn't hold on anymore. The line was cutting right through his hand. And so he had to push me in front, and it was my turn to hold on. And he held on to me. But as soon as we did that, the rushing current, you know, being the person in front, it ended up getting into my suit. I ended up just totally expanding into like the Goodyear blimp. And I just was too heavy to even stay afloat enough to breathe out of my snorkel. And right when I was realizing that I was drowning, I didn't have time to think about it, because the barb then broke because I had become too much weight for that barb to handle. And we both were just sent spinning and tumbling into this current. I just clipped my gun to my belt and told my buddy, like, we got to stick together and just freestyle it in. And we both just swam the hardest we've ever swam. And we barely made it back to the last point of that island. I mean, if we didn't get it at that point, I mean, we would have been adrift for a while. And then, you know, and it wasn't even over there. We had to then walk back across sharp lava rock, like bay after bay, and finally got back to the bay where our boat was in, where no one had even, remembered that we were gone. And and I'm just like beaten down, and finally I see the boat, and it's my relief. I dive into the water to swim to the boat, and I just end up like diving face first into a Portuguese man of war that just stung my whole face, made it swell up. And
can you give us the Hawaiian remedy for a Portuguese man of war to the face?
Well, everybody says you have to pee on it, so of course everybody on board offered that to me, which I very politely refused, and instead I ended up accepting just a cold beer, which I used half the time pressing it to my face and the other half just drinking it for comfort.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
It's such a good story. Even the second time around, despite Levi's recording prowess, that was awesome. Beer solves lots of problems, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, today's Veterans Vault is brought to you by Cheryl Daly. That's right, Isaac's mum. And the reason it's brought to you by Isaac's mum, Cheryl Daly, is because she just bought a copy of what, Shrek?
Yeah, 99 tips to get better at spearfishing. She said in her review, this is way better than buying chips from the shop.
Yeah, she loves her fashion chips, that's for sure. But more than that, she loves throwing a feed of fresh fish straight in the chili bin. So thanks, Mrs. Daly. So if you would like your own copy of 99 tips to get better at spearfishing, where can they find it, Shrek?
Go to Amazon.com and get your hands on some actionable information to improve your spearfishing. So the next part of the show is called Veterans Vaults, where we ask our special guests to take us deep into an area of their spearfishing expertise. So we've, because you've been such a well-known, prolific traveller, I thought we'd ask some questions about spearfishing and travel.
Sure.
So one thing I noticed was about maybe, was it 18 months ago, some footage started coming out of all this Arctic diving, and I read through your About Us page, and it talks about diving with all different species of whale, and Norway was mentioned. What other Arctic locations did you dive?
So this year was my first time going to the Arctic, and I went there actually 3 times this year.
Oh, wow.
To Norway, and then also to Nunavut, which is the very, very upper regions of Canada, close to Greenland.
Okay.
And diving the Arctic was just absolutely amazing. And we got to see everything from walruses to narwhals and Arctic char, and just so many species of animals that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, right.
But even before seeing the animals themselves and, the fish and whatnot, like, I think just the fact, just being able to dive ice for the first time, that was just absolutely fascinating to me. And I think I just kind of got to a point in my diving where I felt like I've been to, so many places, and I've also just got to spend so much time underwater, and I absolutely love it. It doesn't grow old to me. But I think I've come to a point where I feel like I have seen most things that there are to see underwater, and being able to dive the Arctic just turned that completely upside down. And and that was just the intrigue for me, is just knowing that that leaving your comfort zone is just such an important thing to do. I think it's hard for all of us, and we all have these voices in our head just telling us like where we belong, where we should stay, and what we're good at. And veering away from that can be a very vulnerable place, and a lot of times, things might not go well. But I do think that it's absolutely the birthplace for self-growth. And so I do try to make sure I always take the time every once in a while to leave my comfort zone and do something different. And the chance to dive the Arctic, that was exactly that. That was taking the world where I feel the most comfortable, the most at ease, and just the most able, and turning it on its head. And I just remember sitting there at the edge of the ice, like just realizing that I had no idea what I was in for. And, you know, I've always just been a major wimp when it comes to cold water and chilly water. And here I am now in a 9mm wetsuit, you know, sitting on a frozen ocean, and just having all of these voices in my head saying, what are you doing? And how is this going to work? And, you know, like, just crazy questions. I don't know what below freezing water feels like. I don't know what it's going to feel like when it touches the exposed skin on my face, or how long it's going to take me to get warm when I get out of the water, because my camp is still an hour away. I don't know if my hair is going to freeze. There were so many unknowns that were just making me so nervous and so scared. And I just kind of sat there and listened to them all one at a time. You know, knowing that they're more than insecurities, they have very valid points. And I just tried to answer every single concern with what my plan of action would be. And then I slipped into the water. And as soon as I did, a bunch of those answers, you know, a bunch of those questions were answered immediately, where, you know, first of all, it definitely hurt. Like, my whole face just felt like a billion needles were just poking it and stinging it, and no matter how much Vaseline I had put on it to try and take away that edge, it definitely hurt.
Is that one of the techniques, you put Vaseline on your skin?
That's what I was told, and I did try a dive later without the Vaseline to see if there was a difference, and there definitely was. So, yeah, it does help, but it doesn't prevent it from hurting. It just lessens the edge a little bit. Still worth it to do it for sure. But yeah, after a few minutes, then my face went numb. And then I had about an hour of feeling really good and feeling really comfortable. And, you know, all my wetsuit was doing its job. And even though I was wearing nearly 30 pounds of weight, like, it was all well balanced. And just being able to look around and be in such a foreign world underwater. I mean, just thinking about it right now, it still just gives me shivers in a good way. I mean, I just remember looking down and just seeing the darkness of just miles deep, cold ocean, and then seeing all of these alien-looking creatures emerging and coming up to me, these transparent sea angels with these wings and iridescent colors. And then when I took my first dive and went under the ice and just explored the structure that was below and saw the colors that were there and the way that the ice just illuminates underwater, I felt like a superhero in some foreign world. It was amazing. It was truly invigorating. Wow.
So one of your main sort of inspirations for travel was to sort of put yourself way out of your comfort zone. And
Kimi, I got a quick question. What, besides the Vaseline, because I hate the cold too, like, I'm as soft as they come. Give us some. Have you got any tips for like just staying comfortable, like after the dive? Is there any like little tricks or little pieces of equipment that you could recommend that just make the difference?
There's only so much we after all.
Right. I mean, well, first of all, it's super important to just obviously be geared up correctly, and so. Definitely, I was wearing my 9mm wetsuit, the thickest gloves and thickest fin socks I could find, and all of that. But beyond, you know, and Vaseline on your face. But the way that we did this, I mean, it was really a cool system because it was so cold. I mean, everything was just frozen out there. So what we did is we set up a tent. We set up a tent on the ice. And then we went and we collected a big pot of snow. And we had a little stove that we put in the tent. And we boiled that snow. You know, we melted it and boiled it. So we had a nice boiling pot of water in there. And then so that's where we would go to get into our wetsuits to begin with. So as soon as you don't want to take your clothes off when you're outside, you know, it's freezing. So we go into this like sauna like tent And one person at a time. It was a very small tent, and it kept the heat in, and just pretty much stripped down. And then would take, some snow, mix it in with the boiling water until it was like the perfect warm temperature. Totally lube up your suits, get them all wet and warm, slip into them. Yeah. And then put everything on in there. So by the time you walk outside of that tent, you have so much protection on that you're okay. And then during the dive, I would swim back to the ice, and I'd ask, you're not supposed to, people say don't drink coffee and free dive, but I love coffee so much. And, so I just with my friends were on standby with these thermoses, and I was totally just drinking coffee in between dives just to keep me warm. And that really helped keep my core temperature up also. And then as soon as I would get out of the water actually when I would get out, I could actually handle a bit, but the protocol for getting warm again was back in the tent, back to that boiling water, taking your suit off and just pouring warm water over you over and over again until you're ready to dry off and put the 9 layers of clothing back on and get back out there.
Wow.
When you started to get travel, Kimi, when you started to get opportunities to go traveling, how did that sort of come about, and what did you sort of learn straight off the bat?
Well, my first time ever diving outside of Hawaii or spearfishing outside of Hawaii, that was for the United States National Championships. And so that was the first opportunity I didn't get it, I paid for it and earned it. I wasn't a sponsored diver or anything. I had to fundraise and, sell anything, my art in t-shirts and whatever, I could come up with to raise the funds. And I got to Newport, Rhode Island and competed in the national championships. And after that, I ended up winning that. And then I ended up getting sponsors and more opportunity came my way, but it was always kind of geared around competing. And I did get to, see parts of the world through that, and got to compete in Tahiti and it was amazing. But at the same time, there's just something that didn't really feel right to me, or didn't really feel like the best use of that opportunity for me, knowing that I was going to these places I had never been before. And rather than just truly, exploring and diving into the culture and trying all the different fish and, eating fish every night and meeting people and all those things that I would think that I would love about travel, when the goal is simply to compete, it really changed the whole trip. And so I'd basically be going to these places, but being so focused on a contest where every single day I would just go to the contest grounds and just scout and not shoot any fish, just scout and all for just one day of competition to walk away with a trophy. And I think in the beginning, I did need that. I needed that validation. I wanted to set that goal and see if I could accomplish it. But within no time, I kind of quenched my thirst for that and realized that there could be a lot more to traveling out there than just, scouting for a contest. And so I think after that, I just saved up and took my own trip to Palau and really got to just do it the way I'd want to do it, which, just involves shooting a fish every day and eating that fish with the locals and, going diving with the local spearos and grilling a fish over a fire with them and having all these other amazing opportunities that you couldn't have even planned for happen because you're so available to go with the flow. And I kind of realized, well, this is probably the end of my spearfishing career because there's no way you could make a living off of that. But it sure is fun and it sure does feel right. And even if I have to, just keep working and save up every penny to do this. This is what I like more. And that's what I started to do. But within no time, I don't know, it just seemed like I got a lot more support, and I got even more of a following because people could relate to what I was doing. Because while I was there, along with immersing myself in different cultures and learning everything I could, I was also just learning about the underwater ecosystems and learning about how other people manage their natural resources and just having really conversations, and it just kind of, I think, intrigued a lot of people for the whole idea of exploration, of conservation, of different cultures, of working together, of food, whatever it is. It made spearfishing something that more people could relate to, and I think it also helped bring spearfishing into a better light than it maybe had been to the mass public before. Because I think there's a lot of people out there, who definitely, they see these people, these savages, going into the ocean with these spears and hurting these innocent animals, and oh, how dare you, and I think it's complete ignorance for sure, but I think up until that point, a lot of what we had really was just big fish pictures of holding dead fish, holding trophies, stuff like that. And so if you weren't already at a level of understanding that it's so much more than that, I think that really could push people the wrong way, where I think a lot of people started to think that spearfishing is the opposite of conservation. And I think there's just something about traveling and showing the cultural side of it in different places, and showing the survival side of it, and showing the sustainable side of it, and then just showing the beauty of it, the lifestyle. I think it really helped a lot of people, who are sadly so disconnected to their food source that they might have previously judged us. It really helped them bridge that gap in their mind and see maybe this is not a bad thing, maybe, and it brought, I think that helped bring spearfishing into a better light. And through that, I ended up, getting more opportunities and more support, and just getting opportunities that felt a lot more authentic to who I really am.
What's been your favorite trip so far? If you had to, maybe that's too narrow.
Man. Yeah, that's a really tough one.
Okay.
I love diving Africa, Japan, the Arctic. Really, there's just something special about every different place. And big fish or little fish, they all just come with their own memories that it's hard to choose one.
Do you think that cold water fish taste better than tropical water fish now?
I think they're different. I think that when I'm in cold weather, it's the cold water fish that I need. I need all of those omegas. I need I love that fatty fish because I'm freezing cold, and it helps so much, and it helps sustain me so much more. And the last thing I'd want would be some, lean seaweed eating reef fish. I want the fatty char or the Arctic cod. But when I am home in Hawaii, it really is. It's just all those little seaweed eaters that I love. And so I think, which each place, if it grows together, it goes together. So
nice. I got a quick one. With all your traveling and taking gear all around the world, what are some tips that guys can take away to transport their equipment? What have you found the best way to package equipment up to get it overseas safely?
I still stick with a sports tube, a hard case sports tube. Okay. I just feel the most secure with that. Everybody thinks I'm going snowboarding or skiing or something, but but it's just I like that. I mean, there's so many great soft cases out there today where you can fit your fins and your guns and everything. But there's something about me that I feel so much more secure knowing that my stuff is in a nice hard case, and no matter how it's handled, it will still, be intact when I get to it. A funny little tip that I've learned is that if I'm not going far, and if I am just gonna bring a gun in a soft case or something, and I don't want to put my fins in there, that I can just carry my fins on. They will fit in the overhead compartment of so far every airplane that I've been in. And I have a great backpack where I can just secure them straight into my right backpack, and I don't even have to hold them. But I would have to say that part of that is just, it makes sense. But another reason why I tend to do that is because the conversations you'll have in airports are just amazing. People have no idea what these long flippers are. Or, if there's any other free diver in the near area of you, they will come straight up to you and have a conversation. So it's also just like a really good way to meet people, which has led me to dive spots and just, everything, because when people see you holding these fins, they'll make that connection and they'll come up and talk to you. And now that's like half the reason why I do it.
I've seen a couple of awkward conversations, funny you should mention it. Like we walked into the swimming pools one day, Turbo and I, and he had his big fins and someone came up and said, "Oh, what are they for? You must dive really deep with them." And Turbo was like, I should get down deep with them, but, he had to tell them, what his actual limits were. But they understood, and I got to share with them a little bit about what they can be used for, so that was pretty cool.
You wise old sage.
Next part of the show is the funniest thing you've experienced out spearfishing.
Gosh, I'm sure there's funnier ones, but very recently, I just took a bunch of my girlfriends diving. A lot of them are getting into free diving and spearfishing, and it was my friend Jess's birthday, and her wish was to have an all-girls crew and go get some dinner. So,
cool.
Yeah, so we all took the boat out. She's an awesome boat captain, and we were just diving, and it was not a serious day because all of them are still learning, and none of them have wetsuits or anything. So I just was in my bikini that day, and just showing them the ropes mainly, but going down and, poking a few fish here and there. And then I saw this huge octopus, and as I think we know where this is going, but anyway, I went down and tickled this octopus out of its hole, and it ended up being like a big one. Like its tentacles were longer than my own arms, and so and so as I grabbed it and waited for the opportunity to bite its head, it was a lot harder than the usual one, and it took me a little longer. And I could just hear my friend Jess just laughing through her snorkel underwater. Like, it's cracking up, and I'm like, "Wow, I guess people really get a kick that I bite my octopus and whatnot, But I killed the octopus. I was dispatching it, and she was just still laughing. And it wasn't until I was completely done that I looked down, and it had totally undressed me without me knowing it. And I still had my bikini bottoms on, but it just totally took off my top while I bit it, and I didn't even know. And that's why I just was cracking up, is because I was half naked while putting an octopus in my mouth.
That's a pretty cool story. Awesome. All right, fast 5 facts for noobs. So if you were starting spearfishing all over again, what 5 bits of advice would you have loved to have had?
Well, first of all, I did definitely, stick with this tip, and I think that it worked out really well for me. So I would say a new spearo should start with a 3-prong. I am a firm believer of that. I know it probably doesn't apply to everybody, but I think that it's just such an important step of the learning process. And why would you want to speed through that? Like, I know there's really big fish out there. I know there's a huge selection of guns out there, but
there's just fish out there, Kimi, and I want to shoot some.
I know, but there's the starting with a pole spear. I just feel like that's such an instrumental time where you can develop these reactions, because you don't have the range that a gun has. You really need your fish to come really close to you, and so you're going to learn so many techniques of bringing that fish close to you that you wouldn't have to learn if not. And secondly, just when you spear a fish with a 3-prong, it's not secure right away. And so you have to usually pounce like a cat and grab it, pin it against a rock, or do all these crazy things. And to me, it's that intuition. It's that natural instinct. It's just that reaction that you develop because you need to develop it. It's going to be so handy for you later in life. And I would think it would be a little hard to start with a gun and get all these huge fish and then go back to a 3-prong. So I would just say, if you start with a 3-prong, I'm very, very Mr. Miyagi about this kind of stuff.
Old Shrek's sitting here. He's nodding away. He's in complete agreement with you, which I love because this means that next time we're going out, Shrek can use the pole spear. I'll just stick with my roller head.
Yeah, I'm into that. Hey, Kimi, thanks for your first tip. That was a real alpha tip. Have you got like a beta tip or a delta tip for turbo?
What?
Well, not everyone's capable, so maybe just like a toned down tip for people with.
Give us an awesome pole spear tip because I was mad about them at one point, and who knows, maybe I'll get fired up again. But what's a great pole spear tip?
I would say, one little pole spear tip that I don't see a lot of people doing is you don't have to load it. You don't have to stretch that rubber and hold it into place before you take your drop. I mean, that's what I see everybody do. But the amount of energy that your muscles need to hold that thing, there goes all of your oxygen, So what I do is I just dive down with it uncocked and just check out the situation first. And then when I see the fish, then I play my little flirt game while I'm loading it, and it buys you so much more bottom time than if you're using your muscles to hold that tight from the get-go.
That's awesome. That's great.
So when you're using it next weekend, don't cock it, go to the bottom, play your creek game.
I'm going up to Swains this weekend. So I might take it with me. Hey, okay, that's 2 tips, Kimi. Can we get 3 more?
Another good tip. Okay, well, another good tip for a beginner it would just be anytime you get a new mask, you have to know that thing is going to fog up like you've never seen anything fog up before. So don't just get a new mask right off the shelf and think that you're going to go diving with it like that because it'll ruin your whole dive. Most of the masks that are on the market today, they have this film that's on them that it will make that mask fog. And so there's, that you have spit that you can use, and you have these sea drops and all these other defogging things. But for a new mask, that usually isn't enough. You'd have to spit on it and scrub it 20 times and hope that would do the job. And so I would really recommend, if you have a new mask, immediately go for something just a little more abrasive like toothpaste and spend the time before you even get in the water just scrubbing the inside of those lenses over and over again, just really trying to get it as clean as you can. And when you think you're good, do it again, because you don't want to be out there in the water dealing with it there.
Cool. Great advice. Okay, that's 3 tips, 2 more.
Okay, my main tip, it was a total go-to, but it's the best advice that was ever given to me when I was freediving, and it's simply, when you feel the need to speed up, slow down. And I truly do believe this. Whenever I watch a new person trying to dive, it's just crazy how fast they'll try and swim or how hard they'll try to kick. And I think the mentality behind that is that they want as much time as they can possibly have on the bottom, as much bottom time. And so they feel like if they get there a lot faster, they'll have more time. But it truly is the opposite. The harder you kick, the more energy you spend. The more energy you spend, the more oxygen you lose. And if you really want to make that one breath of air count, go slow. Slow is fast in the water. And the minute you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I've been down here too long, I'm running out of air, you start to feel those little indicators that are like, hurry up, rush, rush, rush. Those should be the indicators that tell you go slow. Anytime you feel that need to speed up because you think you're running out of oxygen or whatever it is, do the opposite and make yourself slow down. And I just think that you will be so surprised at not only how much more time you actually have, but just how much safer it is to dive that way. Because panic is the first thing that will just make you run out of air in a heartbeat. So don't panic, don't rush, slow down.
Slow down, Shrek. When you feel the need to speed up, you creep, slow down.
All right, you got a last tip for us, Kimi?
Sure, I do.
She's got tips for days.
We're picking on it.
I think that one cool thing about the ocean is that nothing goes to waste in it. And so for me, it's like if I do have an octopus and I know that the part of the octopus I don't want to eat is the guts, like I will always try and get rid of that in the ocean, before I get out of the water, because that's where it best belongs. But you can always use these opportunities and be a little more resourceful about it. And the more that you get to know the animals you're hunting, it's like the more it can all make sense. So if I get an octopus, I know that I'm going to swim out to a place where there's fish, and that's where I'm going to, take the guts out of my octopus and see what that brings in. Because it really, the more resourceful you can be, it just shows you like that whole circle of life. And it's amazing how many fish I've gotten just from simply cleaning my fish in the water or cleaning my octopus in the water. And definitely it comes with the danger of bringing sharks and other things in too. But I think when you are at a level where you're comfortable enough to handle what could come in, you should see what it can bring in.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
That's a great tip.
All right, I'm going to sum up your Fast Five. You did a great job, by the way, Kimi. Tip number 1, if you're brand new, don't skip the pole spear step. Tip number 2 was with a pole spear, you don't have to load up at the surface. Tip number 3 was when you get a new mask, make sure you prep it and spend your time prepping it, because you don't want to be dealing with fog when you're diving. Tip number 4, and the theme of your TedX video, is slow down when you feel the need to speed up. And it makes sense on a lot of different levels, you said. And tip number 5 was make sure there's no waste. Use everything and be resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
And tip number 6 was watch out for octopuses. They're perverts. So,
yes, exactly.
Like Turbo. So
anyway,
that's cool. The last sort of question is, what's in your dive bag from head to toe? Sort of what are you wearing on day-to-day diving there in Hawaii?
I
say it wrong now. I've realised I said it wrong.
That was very good. I have fin socks and booties, and I have fin keepers, those little rubber elastic things that can hold your fins to your feet better. I have my long blades, my long rife blades. I have a 2-piece wetsuit.
Is that a rife?
You use mostly rife?
I switch off. Okay, so I have a rife. A rife wetsuit that I wear quite often, and it has a hood and everything. But lately, I've just been very strange. I really have liked diving without a hood, because I'm learning really to listen to kind of one sense that I haven't tapped into much in the ocean is just a sense of sound very much, and I found that now, like diving without a hood when I'm not in cold water, it is amazing how much more aware I'm becoming of things. You can hear a reef before you see it. And so if you're scouting out new grounds and you start to hear this crackling noise, even before you can see anything, if I follow that crackling noise, it's the sound that a reef makes. It's just the live corals and everything. No matter what, like if you don't have a hood and you can really try this, swim over sand and listen to how that sounds, swim over a very active reef and listen to how that sounds. And it's truly amazing what you can learn from your sense of sound. But so I do switch off here and there. Sometimes I wear my hoodless custom Patagonia wetsuit, and sometimes I want want to be completely covered from head to toe in my Rife Digitech. So it's always one of those. And then I have my Rife weight belt with my weights. I have my Nixon dive watch. I have my Rife gloves. I have my AQA Rife frameless mask. And I have my snorkel. Oh, and I have my knife.
Cool. Okay. And can I ask, whose pole spear are you using and why do you love it?
I love the Rife pole spear if I'm going after big game. So if I am like in the Bahamas and, going after big snapper out there, that's what I go to because it has every option that I can use for hunting down a big fish. But when I'm just home in Hawaii, winging it, I have a whole assortment of just old spears, and they're all like, 7 feet long or shorter, but just a bunch of them. Yeah. I kind of just like the simplicity of it and switch off quite often. Most recently, I've been using a Lance O'Hara, half aluminum, half graphite.
That's an awesome dive bag.
Yeah.
So, look, what are you doing in the next 12 months, Kimi? What are your sort of plans? You got more travel on the horizon?
Well, for the rest of the year, I'm going to try and stay home. I've traveled so much this year alone where I think I've been to about, 11 different countries from when the year started. And now I really want to put in my time just, where my roots are at. But come January, I'm going to go to Antarctica.
Oh, wow.
I figure I saw the top of the world, so I might as well go see the other side of it.
Wow. So leave from the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand, or is that the way you're going to go?
Maybe. I don't know. I think we are going to sail across Drake's Passage, so maybe leaving from the tip of South America and going across that passage on a sailboat. The details are still being organized, but we're definitely going to make that happen in January.
Look, okay, cool. I've mentioned your YouTube channel several times in the interview, so I'm going to link that up in the show notes. People can find those on noobspearo.com. You also do art and you're a culinary chef. Where can people come and find you?
KimiWerner.com. That is my website, and I think that's where you can, that's just the home of pretty much everything that I've created so far, whether, videos or stories or blogs or recipes, and we have my art section coming soon, so that would be the best place. Instagram's always good too, I guess.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I'll link all that up in the show notes. I'm going to try a ceviche recipe that you have up online.
When he shoots a fish.
I really want to try it out. So, cool. Awesome. It's been great to have you on the show, Kimi, and it's been a long time coming, so thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. It was an absolute cracker. I thought I was exceptional. Shrek, you're okay. So if you would like to connect with us further, get on to noobspearo.com and check out our email newsletter. It comes out once a month. It's full of the happenings and goings on around the place and some great deals on there from our sponsor, Adreno. Now, further than that, if you are a fan, need a new shirt or even just a grease rag, check out Noob Spearo's new line of shirts. So that's in our store there. And Shrek, what can they do if they want to become truly a master of spearfishing?
Yeah, look, Noob Spearo Podcast is always about helping people to become better spearos, and we have condensed and combined some of that information along with our own experience into an ebook that you can find on Amazon.com. It's called 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing, the actionable information you need to improve your spearfishing. Also, guys, quick request, wherever you listen to the show, leave us a review. It helps other people find the show, and it's always good to be chatting with you. Looking forward to getting in your ears again in another fortnight.
Thanks for listening, guys, and hope you nail a big one. Big thank you to our sponsor, Adreno Spearfishing Supplies. You can find Adreno in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. They are one of the biggest and best spearfishing stores in the world and stock a full range of spearfishing gear, more than you could ever imagine. So check them out in store, or if you prefer to shop online, check them out at spearfishing.com.au. And do yourself a favour, at checkout, use the code NoobSpearo to save yourself $20 on all purchases over $200. So that is spearfishing.com.au and use the code NoobSpearo at checkout.
G'day guys, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Kimi Werner. I sure did. The parallels with body language, adopting non-threatening body language and, between spearfishing and real life was phenomenal. Really enjoyed hearing a bit more about that big great white shark encounter as well. Look, next interview, we are off to Greece to talk with Vasily Koronios. He is a fantastic spearfishing video maker. His editing skills are phenomenal. He recently came second in a video competition over there that we will discuss more during that interview. Catch you later.